it's advancing our strategic plan and addressing 6 critical areas. And these are challenges that our state has. And it's LSU's responsibility to tackle these challenges, whether they're health related, whether they're agricultural related, whether they're economic development related. These are indeed our responsibilities as a flagship university, and one that has the capacity throughout the state with our medical schools to address these. The economic impact study that just came out 2 weeks ago shows that LSU's true impact throughout the state is $5.1 billion, and nearly 20,000 jobs are related to something that LSU does. 10,000 are directly related to LSU on the campus. So we've got a lot of businesses and companies that rely on the spending that LSU does within our state, but also within the economic impact of what our graduates stay in the state and do, which is estimated at $803 billion, just the class of 2016.
There's a lot going on, and for the past 2 weeks we've been traversing the state and hitting all of our campuses, talking to our medical professionals, talking to our Pennington researchers, our students in LSU Eunice, our faculty over there, LSUA, LSUS, and just talking about the great collective power of LSU to solve our state's challenges, to address our state's problems, of which I'll outline. And I want to thank all of you that have played such a role in the last 2 years on working on our strategic plan that identified 6 key areas as we go forward. And without the collective support and the shared governance that we interacted with to identify these critical areas, not just for LSU, but to the citizens of the state and the citizens of the region, of which we could be a role model nationally as we go forward, because it seems that the challenges most states are dealing with are the exact same challenges, not perhaps even worse for some of them, as I'll mention for us here. The timing of this little tour that we went on, certainly I think we coincided. We got lucky because the state was debating whether or not to have a special session. And we know they're getting together on Monday, and we're very pleased because we've said over and over again, it's time you solve this problem early and don't drag it out till June, and don't hold our parents and students hanging out there till June about TOPS, about cuts to higher education, as it has been done in the past. But the timing, and I'll come back to that, but the timing also is good because we just entered hearings in the Senate side of the reauthorization of the Higher Education Act, which equates to about $175 billion in federal support to our students, and which ultimately to our institutions. But when states are now down to $75 billion in support, and the federal government through Title IV funds is up to $175 billion, this reauthorization couldn't be more significant for our students with regard to loans, grants, more importantly tax credits. All of these are factored into the debates going on. And yesterday, another debate on affordability, of which we've been working with Senator Cassidy, who is on the Help Committee, the Senate Help Committee. Number one goal was to tackle the House's Prosper Act, which I'm not sure many of them even read. The Senate is really going to have to come through for us on many of these fronts. So this is all going on at the federal side as I speak. State status. The points we've been making throughout the state is that when you provide us a stable budget, as what they did last year for the first time in 9 years, after going through 16 cuts in 9 years, when you give us a state budget, remarkable things can happen, and we can tackle and work on the biggest issues that plague our families, our students, our citizens of the state and our region, whether it's environmental, energy, poverty, as I'll point out in a little bit. The stability of what we've had this year has allowed us to do a number of things, and we'll point this out in hearings next week in the Capitol. But just having a stable budget has allowed us to bring in the largest cohort of new faculty in the last 10 years that we've experienced. This cohort nearly doubles every cohort that we've hired, certainly since I've been here in the last 5 years, about 134 strong. Normally we're bringing in, depending on the year, 50 to 72 or 75. But this new cohort of faculty also shows the strength of LSU around the United States, as many of you have come from other institutions. But this new cohort comes to us, 3 from Wisconsin, 2 from Michigan, a couple from Berkeley, UCLA, University of Washington in Seattle, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Oxford, the Sorbonne, Punjab Agricultural University, the largest agricultural university in India. Some of the greatest universities on earth, we're bringing in faculty. And this cohort shows that our reputation is still strong, and people come here to address with their research, teaching, and service to tackle many of the issues that I'll share with you today. But first, I'd also like to point out at the federal level and at the state level, what this boils down to is not that this year's budget is worse than last year's budget or 3 years ago or 4 years ago. This boils down to nothing but choices. Choices we make in legislative halls, choices we make as voters. This is nothing more than issues of choices that we go forward with. And by that I mean that these choices are not the most difficult we've seen and what we're faced with. In fact, as the state's land-grant university and only one of 17 land-grant, sea grant, and space grant universities, I can't think of a harder time or a harder period of time than when we created land-grant universities in 1862. The creation of land-grant universities in 1862, which was passed by Congress and then signed by Abraham Lincoln, they signed this between the battles of Shiloh and Gettysburg. Robert E. Lee and the Confederate troops had Washington surrounded, and they passed the greatest public university bill that has been copied all over the world in terms of a federal-state partnership and encouraging states to create public universities that do much more than what the institutions were willing to do at that time. At that time, humanities and the arts were certainly specialties of the East Coast institutions, which is a part of the land-grant mission, as I'll point out. But also, we needed roads to move armies and move populations. We needed agricultural scientists to feed populations, to make sure food safety and disease were out of the system. We needed military scientists. We needed things that universities weren't willing to provide. So at the time of the creation of the land-grant initiative, this nation said we need these things, and the state said we need them too. And we embarked on the greatest public university initiative that this country's ever seen, and that many countries have, as I mentioned, have copied. So what I'm saying around the state is that we've got much bigger issues as faculty than to worry about the daily arguments that go on, which we will be in the middle of. But we're tired of being on defense. We played defense for 9 years. The collective capacity of LSU, our A&M campus, the flagship campus, we're the only ones that can solve the problems that I'm going to share with you. We're the only ones that can help our state get better. We're the only ones that can help us make the right choices. In this state, we're the only one that generates $500 million in research-related activities that brings it to Louisiana. And so many of these things are solely a product of what our faculty and staff and our students generate right here at LSU. So from Shreveport to Lake Charles, from New Orleans to Alexandria, there are many different missions of our institutions. We have a two-year college. Our LSU Eunice campus is the best transfer two-year school in the state. But it also serves 48% Pell Grant eligible students, first-generation students. So it's a tremendous access for social mobility, which I'll address. The challenges that I think are very important, our strategic plan is designed to tackle not the challenges facing LSU, which we fight every day in the funding circles, but the challenges of our state and our region. As I mentioned, that this land-grant mission, we're a member of an elite 1% of universities in the United States because only 17 can claim their land-grant institutions, sea grant, and space grant. And what does that mean? Land grant means that we were created to solve the problems of the country at the time. Sea grant means that we were actively engaged in saving our nation's and international coastal and waterways. Space grant means we do a lot of work in space. Space grant means that the work with NASA to build rockets that carried the space shuttles and will take us to Mars occurs right here in Louisiana with our engineers and our scientists and our equipment at the Michoud Assembly Facility south of New Orleans. Most people don't even know that. That's quite a remarkable challenge for us. 3 letters bond us together, no matter where we call home, and it's LSU. But I hope you take this strategic plan and find where we fit, because many of these areas don't just fit into one department. Many of these areas fit into so many different things that we do and we do well. So the first initiative that we thought was most important among the 6, and these aren't ranked in any order, was advancing the arts and culture. As you know, Louisiana has one of the richest, if not the richest, arts and culture states in the United States. You experienced it with Mardi Gras. Food, arts, culture. We attract people from all over the world to Louisiana for this. And we also create the thinkers, the creators, the doers, many of whom contribute in their various respective fields in this area. Also point out the humanities, our work in the humanities. And in a recent study, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences study showed that, and you don't hear this much because there's always the bickering between C.P. Snow's two cultures, but what this study shows is that humanities students are gainfully employed. They're not only gainfully employed, but they hold a disproportionate amount of leadership positions in companies, in government, and other businesses, in other areas. And their job satisfaction is just as happy. They're just as happy as STEM graduates. And we talk a lot about STEM because it carries a lot of weight in a nonpartisan way, but our humanities are just as important to our graduates and our students. For those economists, those that think that money matters, tourism in the arts and culture creates nearly $7 billion in economic impact to Louisiana, and it has created over 222,000 jobs. It's a serious economic impact issue for us, and as we continue to educate artists, writers, filmmakers, historians, and sociologists, this is a big industry. This is a big industry, bigger than most states can attest to. So to continue our advancement of the arts and culture and humanities, we accept that challenge. We're the only one that can do it as well as we do. The second area is bringing the coast and environment and energy together. Now, this area is we're always challenged to find energy solutions that do not sacrifice our existing industries, but also don't destroy our coast or fragile surrounding environments. That's a tough challenge. And I have to say, many places in the world are watching us closely to see how we do this, because we live in the greatest laboratory in coastal erosion and coastal loss, and among those in the world. We lose a football field of coast every single hour that passes. LSU researchers work towards mitigating the nearly $5 billion lost in production that's lost with that coastal erosion. Losing $5 billion due to the erosion. Many of you saw in the paper our new river model, and I saw Clint here earlier. Our new river model is the nation's largest working model of the Mississippi River. And if you haven't seen this, it's truly remarkable. It's the size of an NBA basketball court. It's downtown just by the bridge. And we hope every student that wants to study science gets an opportunity to see this, and every child sees and tours this. The goal here is to allow us to make better use of valuable silt for land building purposes, like the Netherlands. Land building, not loss. In energy, our LSU researchers have developed and enhanced oil recovery methods that can extract more than 450 billion barrels of oil currently trapped within our oil fields. And right down the road on Nicholson, we have the nation's only university-owned hands-on blowout prevention training facility to prevent disasters like the Deepwater Horizon from ever happening again. That's a pretty tall order. It's a pretty tall order for our faculty, our grad students, and our students. But most importantly, what we do involves our ag centers that with our youth wetlands program and 4-H, we've educated over 600,000 since 2007 students that are interested in restoring our marshlands and keeping our coast. And I'd like to always come back to what we're doing, because this is an intergenerational impact that we have and should always have at LSU. We do all this by making our institution, our facilities, and our experts, we must be the go-to folks, the go-to researchers when they need answers, like they did when Sandy took a left hook into New York City and flooded the subway in Manhattan. They called our people. They called our people. Because as I tell people in Washington, I said, you know, the thing about LSU is we're pretty good with disasters. We've had more than anybody, and we can handle them. So we get these calls, and we should, as the go-to researchers. The third area that we're challenged to continually provide better service and improve our state is fostering greater research and economic development. And Dr. Deck Terrell and Stephen Barnes are here. I know they're in the audience. And they just released a week and a half ago, actually 2 weeks ago today, our economic impact study, which we release every 5 years. The last economic impact study for LSU was released in 2013, and it indicated that LSU and our collective activities generates $3.9 billion for this state. $3.9 billion. Today, the recent study indicates that LSU brings in more than $5.1 billion in economic impact and activity across this state, not to mention the region, but just across Louisiana. Of that, this campus, the flagship campus, is responsible for over half of that. $2.7 billion in total economic impact, $803 million in total earnings that go back into the economy and have multiplier spillover effects in almost everything we do in daily life. And 18,586 jobs that are directly attributable to what happens at this university and the work that you do, of which 7,000 are direct employment of LSU. We're an economic engine. We're one of the biggest economic engines, and I would challenge some of the big companies that are in here. I would say we could be the most important economic engine to this state because we're not going anywhere. We're here to stay. Of that, you could even point out that DXC, if you remember, in November we announced the largest company, new company coming to Louisiana. The second largest company announcement of the nation was DXC going into New Orleans. DXC came to New Orleans to offer 2,000 to 3,000 new high-tech jobs. The reason DXC is here is because they're going to be set up in our College of Engineering and our computer science operation so we can help them with their R&D and their research and development. They would not be in Louisiana, and you can call them and ask if they hadn't worked with LSU each step of the way to get here. And that's not just in producing the graduates they need, which other universities will contribute to, but we're the only one that they trusted in handling the R&D so they could bring their problems to us to solve on our campus right here. We beat out 300 other cities and opportunities and finally beat out Nashville for this new job opportunity that you hear the governor talking about each and every day. But most importantly, in economic development, our class of 2016 graduates, because of the educational attainment level that we help them move to a higher level of educational attainment, they actually have $5.8 billion in increased lifetime earnings, and that's just the class of 2016. In other words, if they hadn't pursued college or an LSU degree, that $5.8 billion is the net gain in lifetime earnings that will be spent in our communities and spent in our cities and spent on our campuses and all the above. And once again, I go back to the research of all this. We generate $500 million in outside external related research activities, $500 million. You put that in perspective, the main campus gets $125 million from the state to run our operations from the state. We get $200 million collectively to run our medical schools and all the enterprises of LSU. That's almost a 2.5 times ratio, what we're generating in outside research activity. And this continues to grow, and I appreciate this is another reason why stable, predictable budgets can help us. We've gone up from 700 submissions for outside research grants to 800, just because we have more faculty submitting more with stable budgets, worried about less, and moving into areas that we need to move into to make sure that we're getting our fair share. But we got work to do. We have work to do. And many of us are here to solve these problems. Louisiana ranks 49th in overall opportunity. We rank 48th in economic opportunity, 44th in equality of opportunity, 42nd in per capita income, and 40th in infrastructure. You're going to hear a lot of 40s in this speech, and these 40s are our job to help us get out of the 40s in these areas. The fourth area in the strategic plan that challenge ourselves to accept is improving the health and well-being of this state. I consider this area, this fourth area, an all-hands-on-deck issue. involving our med schools, Pennington, our ag centers, the work that we do here in science and education, and about everything we do involves the health and well-being. Research from our faculty right here on campus, along with the Health Science Center, we continually work to change this. But when I share with you the numbers, it tells you the challenge we have in front of us, but also tells you the opportunity we have to help this entire state. 1 out of 6 Louisianans have diabetes. More than 60 people in our state are diagnosed with cancer daily, with mortality rates that are 15% higher than the national average. Our state ranks 5th in the nation for Alzheimer's-related deaths. United Health rankings rank us 49th in overall health, 49th in female health, 50th in infectious diseases, and 46th in cancer-related deaths, 46th in cardio deaths. And it's worse in the rural areas. We must see this as our challenge and measure our success by helping our state get better in all these areas, in health and related areas. In many ways, you know, we're the largest producer of medical professionals in the state. We're the only producer of dentists. We're the only school of dentistry in New Orleans. That's an LSU product. These are our challenges in this area. And for industry and companies to pay attention to this, the CDC reports that productivity losses among companies and industry related to health-related problems cost employers annually $230 billion in lost productivity from health-related issues. And I would argue to say with our numbers that disproportionately impacts us. The 5th area is transforming education. And this is important because this is where health overlaps. Children who are obese miss more school, have more school problems, less likely to finish, less likely to graduate and go on. I'd like to start by saying transforming education is not just what we do here. That's why you see busloads of 6th graders on campus to learn what college is about, and they can succeed if they're here. But this issue is an issue of, first of all, we got to drop the blame. We got to drop the blame. Colleges, universities, and this isn't us specifically, but colleges, universities need to quit blaming high schools. High schools need to quit blaming middle schools. Middle schools need to quit blaming elementary schools. We saw how this could work in Long Beach, California, when we actually worked together and saw every one of our children as our kids or future students. When the state legislature tells us that, well, the ag centers don't have any students, I say they do have students. They have 200,000 pre-college students in the 4-H programs. 200,000 pre-college students. Education is the key, unlike ever before, to social mobility. And we perform so well and better in social mobility than most of our peers. Overall mobility ranked by the Chetty study last year, which is now the hallmark study of whether social mobility still exists in this country. Overall, in social mobility, we rank in at least getting students from lower quintile up to quintiles. We rank 14th among 50 flagship universities in the country. Now that also means we've got a lot of low-income students, 22% on the main campus, 40 at Alexandria, 48% at others. From getting the bottom 40th quintile to the top 40th quintile, we rank 10th among 50 flagship universities. And I'll come back to how important of this social mobility is. But that's all of our jobs. That's all the staff, the faculty. Everything we do is to make sure social mobility is alive and well in this country, which it continually is questioned with each decade since the 1980s. And in many ways, we've got to prove Tocqueville right, because right now the regression of this is swift, and I'll point out a couple studies that certainly show this. But also, a reason we don't need to pass blame is more than 6,000 LSU grads are teaching in our Louisiana schools. Why would we blame our graduates? Aren't we blaming ourselves at the end of the day? More than 1,200 LSU graduates teach right here in the East Baton Rouge Parish. These are our graduates. These are administrators. Those kids are our kids. Our graduation rate doesn't start at orientation. Our graduation rate starts in preschool. The challenge that we face in this area and why this is so important is that we are in danger of being the only generation in the history of America to leave the next generation with less economic and educational opportunity. And LSU's capacity, what we can do to slow this down or readdress this, is what we do every day. A statistic that sticks with me is that our 55 to 64-year-olds in this country rank #1 in the world in percent with college degrees. In the OECD 30, #1. Our 25 to 34-year-olds now rank 13th in college degrees as a percent of the population. And we're dropping. By the year 2022, we're going to fall behind Bulgaria at 19th if we don't see this as our challenge and the importance of transformational education and our work in the schools, which many of our programs do every day. But it's everybody's responsibility, not just the College of Human Sciences and Education. It's all of ours. This is our pipeline. This is our pipeline to engineering, our pipeline to business. Which I can say, once again, the stability of this budget and the work that our admissions staff has done to improve that pipeline has never been stronger. And we challenge our state legislature to see this and solve this problem in the next 2 weeks so it doesn't endure till June. Our applications this year, along that pipeline coming from K-12, our applications are higher than they've ever been, 38% up from where they've been last year. We're 80% up on African American applications. We're 60% up on Hispanic applications. We're 70% up on out-of-state applications. We do not want the state to derail this momentum. And they can get on the train or get off the tracks. And that's the point we're going to be making next week and throughout the term. The final area is about developing leaders. Our leaders and the students we educate, we should be taking them with us in every step of the way. I was told that a couple years ago that students are involved in the teaching part of what we do. I think students need to be a part of the teaching, research, and service part of what we do, because who's going to do it when we're gone? Where's the next generation of researchers? If we're able to get us from 49th to 46, who's going to get us to 42nd? Who's going to get us to 39th? It's going to be the students we're teaching. And I know Professor Gonzalez is here. Gabriella, are you in the audience? Yeah, there you are. She'll be the first to tell you that it was 2 grad students at 4:23, I think, in the morning that discovered the gravitational wave of which they've been working on for decades and decades. Can you imagine as a graduate student in physics putting that on your resume and applying for a job? And what they're going to go on and do? We must take our students with us. It's our undergraduates, our promise to SACS, that undergraduate research is going to be a focus, and that our students are going to be the next ones that get us. If we're lucky enough to get us from 45th to 42nd, they can get us from 42nd to 37th. We develop leaders in just about every field. Over half the state Supreme Court are ours. Our earnings outrank many of others throughout the United States. We're ranked 18th in mid-career earnings among flagships, 21st in starting salaries. These students go on to do great things. We've got leaders from Nike to Nissan. We've got Pandora to Pixar, Google to Gerber. We even have a former graduate student who was on the leadership team that took the Mars rover to Mars. Remember that dune buggy that bounced around? That was one of our people at Caltech. These are the grad students that you're educating. We want them to do better than us. And if we don't bring our students along with us in this process, that's part of the transformational education, the intergenerational impact. So this is a challenge for us. We have leaders everywhere, but our leaders also need to understand the challenge to use, and the challenge on us is to use our teaching, research, and service to remain a staunch guardian of advancing social mobility in a nation where recent studies have shown a national decline in social mobility. My sources are Brookings, World Economic Forum, The Atlantic, The Economist, the Financial Times, the New Yorker, the New York Times, the list goes on and on. If we're not the guardians of social mobility and helping our next generation get to a better generation in economic success and educational success and discovery through research, then we're not doing our jobs. And we're not the flagship, and we're not the land grant, sea grant, space grant university that we are. And I think this is everybody's job. We have done a wonderful job at getting to this point. Now we need to see our success based on the success of our state and our region. Because what people can learn from our success, poverty is everywhere, inequality is everywhere. All of these issues, coastal erosion, you can talk to people in Miami Beach or Long Beach, California, or Indonesia to the Netherlands. That's a worldwide problem. And the solutions we devise to help us will have international impacts throughout the world. So I go back to this point about choices as they get together on Monday and they argue about this budget's worse than last year's. I want to go back to choices. It's not that complicated. We choose to do some things and we choose not to do others. If you ask any legislator today, they would look at their budget and say, how did we get here and why did we tie up 80% of our budget? Can we do it all over? If we did it all over, it would look very different. Well, do it. Do it and get out of our way, because we've got big issues to solve for the state. And these are our challenges as faculty and staff. And every citizen of this state and region, whether they know it or not, are reliant on what we discover, reliant on who we help, and reliant on what we do for their children. And that's a challenge we have to accept, because that's our job, because nobody else in this state has the capacity and the reach to do all these things. I'll conclude by saying I'm a seventh generation Kentuckian. Kentucky's funding per student is 2.5 times what ours is by the state. Kentucky's natural resources and per capita income is far less than Louisiana's. Yet their educational attainment level is higher than ours. And they prioritize higher education. And for me to see Kentucky that would love to have the choices that we have as a state that go well beyond tobacco, well beyond coal, which is a dying industry, and well beyond bourbon. The choices they wish they had were our choices as a state. And these choices can make a difference in the next generation of researchers, thinkers, teachers, and in the work that we do each and every day in the classroom. And it doesn't diminish the economic impact, it only adds to the economic impact when we lift other students to higher levels of educational attainment. And you know what also it does? If we improve our educational attainment, I'll make a guaranteed fact that we won't be 50th in incarceration. Educational attainment correlates, the correlation between success in school, success in college, and prisons. Just measure that. We won't be 50th in imprisonment and incarceration, and we won't be on the bottom. So there is a spillover effect for us to succeed in these challenges. The spillover effect is, would it be great to be 46 in incarceration or 36 in incarceration? Because our educational attainment level's 32nd or 36th. It's all related. That's why these 6 areas in the strategic plan are indeed all related. Health, well-being, educational attainment, arts and culture, graduates going on to do great things in leadership. That's our challenge. And we must accept all of these challenges and see this as an opportunity for us each and every day in our classrooms, whether we're faculty or staff, in every corner. If we're not promoting social mobility in this country, who will? In advancing this great idea and concept, which America has been known for, which has been equated to the American dream, then who's going to do it? We're losing ground on this issue, but there are few institutions and enterprises in this country that are still doing a great job at maintaining it. That indeed is our biggest challenge. So thank you all for coming out. I open the floor to questions in a second, but I just appreciate the work that everybody does, and it's collectively. It's the faculty at Eunice who are teaching 50%, almost 50% first-generation students. Faculty here with 22% and our staff, working to help students succeed, working to get us out of 13th, reverse the trend from 13th. And let's start moving back to first. And President Obama recognized that. He was the first president to recognize that we're not on top of the world anymore in college success and attainment. We were, but we're not anymore. The more we address these challenges, the more we tackle and solve these problems, the more our states will recognize how significant and important we are. Now, I may be an optimist in this, but this is our job. These are our challenges, and the state needs to solve this budget problem in the next 3 weeks and get out of our way. And let us go to work and let us keep working on these challenges. So thank you very much for coming out today. I look forward to some of your questions.
We want to play offense and help this state get better and address these issues that we rank 40th to 49th in so many areas. And we can do better. We can do better as a state. We can do better in our faculty, staff, and students, and our research and addressing this and measuring our success by how effective we are. But we need our legislature to play their role and give us a stable budget so it doesn't drag out till June, and which really that puts our students and families in a difficult position, of which we lost 650 last year because they said enough's enough, we're leaving to go to another state. These are big challenges for our state, and we want them to solve the problem in the next couple of weeks, and we appreciate them getting together to do this. Don't drag this out until June. There are consequences in terms of how many faculty we're able to hire. Do we have to withdraw those faculty positions and/or faculty who leave? All of these are big issues that we have to address, not just at LSU, but in all higher education throughout the state.
You mentioned the timetable. What is the timetable for higher education in Louisiana, and how does that compare to the timetable for the legislative session?
So we're not a traditional state agency, and we don't go month to month. I mean, our faculty searches go almost a whole academic year, and we're up against UCLA and Ohio State. For us, it's even more difficult because the competition we're dealing with is not within the state. It's the entire nation. So we're in a head-to-head with many of the top universities to try to attract the best talented people to the state. That includes both faculty and students who may come or may not come if we just live through some more budget uncertainty until the end of June. The end of June, the damage is done. We've had to eliminate those positions. Number one, we've lost the out-of-state student population, and we've lost some of the best and brightest in-state students who have offers to go other places, and those decisions get made May 1st. So our decisions, we need to know we're stable in the next couple of weeks so that we can continue recruiting and continue offering those students that we think we can bring to Louisiana and keep our best and brightest right here. But our timeline June, the damage is done.
How many freshman students did you lose last year because of uncertainty, and what would be the situation for this year?
Well, we anticipated growing by about 200 in freshman class last year. We ended up losing about 450, so a net loss of 650 freshmen that we anticipated that perhaps a big chunk of those would have stayed and gone to LSU if the budget uncertainty didn't last till mid-June.
And what would be the estimate for this year if the decision is pushed back into June?
It will be even more substantial because we have had far more applications than we've had in the past, which has helped because what's helped us is because we had budget stability since then. So now our applicant pool is up 38%. As I mentioned, our out-of-state pool is up 70%, and we're up in almost every pool that we have of applicants as well as admits. So the damage could be even more severe for us this year because the applicant pool and the admit pool was not as robust as it is this year.
What would you like people to keep in mind about 2025 challenge accepted for LSU?
I'd like us all to get back together near the end of 2025 and start measuring us by our effectiveness in addressing economic growth, health and well-being, all the areas that we mentioned. And are we graduating best students we possibly can and serving the economy? Are we working with the state to keep more of them here? All of these issues are things that I'd like us to be held accountable for, and we'd gladly welcome that opportunity.
If people have questions like more information about the LSU system, what should they do?
They can call, well, first of all, the strategic plan's on our website. And then they'd certainly call our office at the president's office or call the provost's office on the main campus, of which is sort of the center of the LSU Complete Strategic Plan, which incorporates all of our campuses and our med schools, Pennington, and our Ag Center.